We ain't stopping. We're holding the heads underwater until they start kicking. And then we're going to hold them a little longer. This was talking about inflation. Inflation is transitory. This is all, basically, this is what the Fed did. And I think that either they f***ed up with the way they were doing it, they did it intentionally and are gaslighting everybody, or they didn't realize that what they were saying was being interpreted differently and they decided that they needed to fucking lay the hammer down. One of those three scenarios, I don't know which one, but here you go. Originally, inflation is transitory. In other words, the supply chain and COVID restructuring. And what I mean by restructuring is it restructured everything. Everybody started working from home. People started moving into the suburbs. We started seeing, schools closed down. We saw, the demand for different things, right? Video game sales, and video game play went up. And then Bitcoin, everything was transitory or because of COVID. So they basically said, yeah, inflation is like this, but we think it's transitory. And everybody said transitory. They automatically assumed transitory meant short-term, right? Transit, like you think of transient, right? Like a homeless person or somebody passing through town. They're just transient, right? But in this case, he's saying, nah, they're transient, but it could be like a homeless person who just decides to set up shop for a couple years, right? So he's like, all right, we're going to have to retire this because inflation just keeps going up. And people are like, I thought you said it was transitory. They're like, well, transitory could mean, it's not forever, but not necessarily 1 or 2 years. So they retired the word transitory. And everybody said, oh, inflation's just transitory. Okay, fine, let's buy, right? So we saw that dip, and then the buying happened again into 2021. Then it comes out into 2022, end of 2022, and it's, okay, we're retiring the word transitory because apparently people don't understand that. And we are going to become more aggressive on our rate increases, right? We're talking about potentially upwards of 4% federal funds rate, right? But at the time, and we saw the market sell off, right, all the way down to 360 or whatnot. But anyway, they're like, okay, here's the thing though, right? We are going to base future increases, how long the increases are going to be, and when we start decreasing based on inflation, right? The job market is good, the labor force participation is big, jobless claims are down, so we're going to wait to see where the quote unquote peak in inflation is. They even came out with a dot plot, for those of you guys who remember a couple months ago. And the dot plot basically had them at federal funds rate of up to 3.75% into 3.25% next year, all the way back down to 2.5% into 2024. And they had done inflation peaking and being back down to their target at 2%. They basically were like, okay, we're going to try and keep rates at this level until we get to a point where rates are higher than the inflation level. So then that told people, in at least from the initial perspective, okay. They're like, okay, so we're just looking for indicators of inflation peaking. So then at 360, we dropped all the way down to 364, right? SPY all the way down to 364. And then the data started coming in. CPI came in lower. PCE came in lower. PPI came in lower. So people started buying. 364, 380. 392. Then the non-farm payrolls came in. 228,000 expected non-farm payrolls came in at 568,000. Holy shit. We're seeing peaking or potential peaking in inflation, and the job and payrolls are being added big time. The economy's going great, and inflation's coming down. They're going to either slow down rate increases or continue rate increases, but sustain them at a shorter amount of time, or keep them and then start cutting them. So then we went from 392 up to 406, and then 408. And then 410. And then what happened? The next batch of data came out. 2 months in a row, lower CPI. Now, granted, we didn't get too excited when this happened because we knew that gas prices were the biggest reason for the decrease in CPI, which is your inflation number, your core inflation number, or you're not your core, you're just overall CPI. But then we saw PPI down again. We saw PPI in this is the United States, not in the EU. Then we saw PCE come in even lower again. And everybody said, well, based on what we saw and what the Fed said, and even Bullard's starting to sound more dovish, let's buy. We got up to 432. Market's back, baby. We're going. Inflation's on the way down. Fed's going to slow down on those rate cuts. Everything that they said, and they said soft landing, right? So a soft landing idea is not raise rates straight up to 4%. wait for inflation, everything, and then drop it down to 2% or 1%, right? That's not a soft landing. The housing market would crash, the labor force would go down, GDP would crash. They're like, okay, we want to do a soft landing, right? We want to rush here, and then we want to do a soft landing, okay? But everybody thought that meant, oh, we're a plane, and we've got, we're a plane here, and we're having a problem with the engine, and we're gonna have to glide the plane into the airport with our wheels down, right? It's scary. We had to do some moves. We had to do some crazy stuff. We had to do flight where we're like, inverting the plane upside down, but we still landed softly, okay, or whatever. But then Powell came out and said, no. Apparently, you motherfuckers misunderstood us, either because we're idiots and said it wrong, or y'all are idiots and couldn't understand. We are not going to see inflation, quote unquote, peak and the job market strong, or labor, I should say, not job market, but labor force participation strong. We're not going to see that and be like, oh, problem solved. Okay, let's start cutting rates, or let's lower the increase, or kind of ease out of it or ease into it. He goes, no, listen here, motherfuckers. We're bringing the pain. Okay? We don't give a shit if inflation peaks and comes down. We don't give a goddamn if the labor market is strong. We are raising motherfucking rates, and we're going to continue to raise them even if it drives us into a recession, and we're going to raise them even more. We ain't stopping. We're holding the heads underwater until they start kicking, and then we're going to hold them a little longer because we have to get rid of the demon inside. This segment brought to you by Massachusetts in 1660. But yeah, so that's basically what happened. And he said the exact words of, even if it drives us into a recession, we are going to continue to raise rates. And even if it hurts the job market and starts reversing the gains we've made, we're going to continue to raise this. And his exact words, he used these exact words, that the American people and businesses are going to feel pain. And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the moment that the sell-off began. Now, do I hate this? In the short term, yes. But this is the reason that America's economy will probably continue to be, remember how we're in this economic war with China over the past decade? This might be what keeps us in the lead again, because while we're going through this pain right now, okay, the rest of the country, the rest of the world is playing this game of kick the can down the road and hope that the U.S. recovers and can bail and everybody else kind of bleeds up in the world, because otherwise they're f***ed. The EU especially. EU is f***ing done for the next 5 years. Okay? And I don't mean like it's collapsing. I just mean like they're talking about the potential of 20% inflation in the UK next year. Okay? You've got no energy. You can't afford to heat your home in the EU this year. Inflation's going out of this world. Okay, you're at the mercy of other people. The euro is getting beat up against the dollar. Everybody's putting their money in the dollar right now because it's the only one that's like strong, right? It's like giving out a loan, right? You give out loans to people, and one person keeps asking you for extensions or asks for more money and says, "I'll still pay you back. I just need a little bit more." And the other one's like, "Hey man, here, let me, it. I still need some of this money, but I want to make sure I pay you back. Here, here's a little extra." Okay, on the loan. It's going to hurt me, but here's a little extra on the loan. Well, then now the loan shark is like, all right, this guy pays it back. I'm willing to break him off a little bit more next time, or he's more valuable to me. All right, same kind of thing here, right? So that's why everybody's jumping in the dollar. And then Asia, even China's like, oh, we just had a collapse in our residential and our real estate market. We're dealing with COVID outbreaks. We're at tariffs, and we've got all this other going on. At least we're friends with Russia and getting oil for cheap right now. We're going to go ahead and cut rates and add quantitative easing again. Like, wait a second, what? And the moment that people start utilizing other places in Southeast Asia for manufacturing production, China's going to have a tough time. So Chinese economy is not gone. It's not gone in any way. But as the U.S. was popping and falling, China was doing the opposite, right? And now we're back to this level, but now we're starting to do this again. Okay? All the while, the EU is just like, the European Central Bank is like, we're going to get tough now. We're going to raise our interest rates. from negative 0.5% to 0%. That's right. That's right. We're getting aggressive over here. You had negative rates, and now it's zero, okay? And I'm not saying that we're better in any way, but we were down to 0.25, and we've jacked that motherfucker up to 2.5% in like 8 months or 6 months. Like, we're like, all right, bitches, we're bringing the pain. Because remember, the supply and availability of cheap money is what is demand, right? The more money you have at a cheap, the cheaper the money is, the more people borrow it. More people borrow, the more people have it. The more people have it, the more people spend it, right? So the demand for products and services and goods goes up when more people have more money, right? But if you make it more expensive, less people have it. Now you have less demand, which should entail, if the supply demand, parallel is there, which there's a lot of factors that mess that up, that'll bring down the prices of things. Okay, that's why you have inflation and deflation on these things. So they're at 0%, but they can't raise much more because, unfortunately, for the EU, now here's the problem with what the EU did. It seems like a utopia when you look at it on paper because, remember, everybody wants to think, and I'm not saying the U.S. is great. I mean, they've got a lot of bad problems in the U.S., but when we're talking about economies and stuff like that, the EU went into kind of a socialized economy for the fact of like everybody together. The problem is that they're relying on mainly one country, okay, and a little bit of these guys, okay, France, to basically hold up everybody else. I mean, these guys are quantitatively easing every fucking country in the EU. They've bailed out Greece, they bailed out Italy, they bailed out Portugal, they bailed out everybody. And they're having to constantly continue to bail them out on a daily, monthly, and yearly basis. Right now, they're having to inject billions of dollars into Spain. Spain has 25% unemployment. Now, you say to yourself, Stocky, everybody in Spain is so happy. They don't work. They still have money, and they still have pensions, and they still have this other stuff, and it's utopia. It's utopia for a little while. But now the problem is that if these two countries, if their GDP starts reversing or slowing down and they don't have the money to continue to bail this out, that means one of two things. They have to go into more debt by borrowing, basically robbing Peter to pay Paul, or they're going to have to cut this off. And if they cut this off, you're talking about Spain, Greece, to an extension, especially after COVID, Italy, and 3 or 4 other countries that are 100% reliant on these motherfuckers.